Dum da dum da dum da da dum da 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 da. All right, hello there, world history people. Welcome to Unit 2, the Networks of Exchange. This unit is mostly all about world trade, how the world is starting to get interconnected together in the 13 and 1400s. But before I talk about trade, today's topic is all about violence. Crazy, unbelievable violence. And the Mongols are coming, kids. They're gonna do some serious damage. And that's what most of these memes are about right here. I'm gonna read this one because it's hilarious. Genghis Khan is considered the greenest invader. He killed so many people that carbon dioxide levels on Earth dropped during his reign. Oh my goodness. Genghis Khan slept with so many women, 1 in every 200 people today are related to him. He even died while doing the dirty. And then the Islamic world and the Christian world are fighting each other, but the Mongols show up and kill everybody. So that's the big topic today, the Mongol Horde. Let's do it. Okay, gotta click the button. There it is. So, the Mongol Empire. This is something that'll absolutely be discussed at length in various DBQs and LEQs. So let me explain it out for y'all. There's this huge part of Asia, really it's like most of modern day Russia, that is collectively known as the Steppe Lands. I've got some pictures of the Steppe Lands right here on this slide, but it's this sort of flat open space that just goes on for literally like 40,000 miles. And the Steppe Lands is where horses sort of evolved and came out from. So it's this just flat land where horses gallop from one end is in Europe to the other end is Asia, where it touches the Pacific Ocean. And this vast, huge area of land, Russia and the Istan countries. I love saying that. It's home to the Mongol and Turkic people. If any people in history are called Turkic, their ancestors are from this land. The whole culture is based around the horse, and the people who live there, it's all about riding horses. I think the Mongol adage is you're born in the saddle. And, oh man, the people of the Steppe Lands are so good at not only riding horses, but also horse archery. I watched this video, it's probably still on YouTube, I should hunt it down, where a Mongol horse archer can ride on a horse at full gallop and shoot his arrows into the spot that's like the size of a quarter and consistently hit that quarter. So top tier archers in the world, top tier horse riders in the world, and they combine those two elements together. They're basically the Lindsey Sterling of violence. And for the entire, wow, I spelled that wrong, the entirety of human history, they were all having civil wars with each other, okay? Like, Europe knew about the steppe people, China knew about the steppe people, India knew about the steppe people, but they're constantly having these civil wars with each other, so it just didn't matter, okay? But that all changed with a dude named Temujin. Temujin will later be known in history as Genghis Khan. And Temujin, he unites the tribes together, and he says, all right, all the Turkic and Mongol people, we're going to just knock down the dominoes of world civilization and take them out, take them over, and do some serious murdering. And that's kind of what this lesson is about, okay? Historical estimates are just always off, but I think it's fair to say that when the Mongols did all their damage in the 1300s, it was probably the most devastating singular event to human beings in the history of the world. I think some estimates are they killed 100 million people. So yeah, like 10% of the population of planet Earth dies to these people because they're all about the violence. Okay, let's jump into it. The Mongol Horde. Oh my goodness. So, yeah, Genghis Khan united all the horse tribes and said, okay, first we're going to China, then we're going to India, then we're going to the Middle East, then we're going to Europe, and we're just, everywhere there's a city, we're going to bring 10,000 or 100,000 horses, and we're going to say, okay, open your gates, give us everything we want. If the city resists, we're going to kill them. We're going to kill the men. We're going to kill the women. We're going to kill the children. We're going to do terrible, unspeakable things. And they most certainly did. Unbelievably violent, unbelievable amount of destruction. Every one of these empires they went to, they would either take it over or sack the cities, and they would bring stuff back to their Mongol capital city of Karakorum. And Karakorum during this period, like if you were a world trader, if you ever got to Karakorum, you would find some awesome stuff to trade for. So that was kind of a big destination city. And I think I might have it in one of the videos, but they practically have a city on wheels. The Mongols, they don't rest. They don't set up camp. They just sort of keep going. Like horse riders would sleep in the saddle. Most Mongol soldiers had like 3 horses with them, and they would sort of bounce from horse to horse to horse so the horses didn't get too tired. The most mobile army in human history. I think I read something online that even with our modern technology, with our airplanes and our cars and our tanks and whatever else we have, the Mongols still move faster than the American military moved through Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's like, oh my gosh. Sometimes there were battles where they killed 10,000 enemies and they lost 0 guys. They did it because they were so good at shooting arrows. They would just launch arrows and run away on their horses. Something else I need to add, so good at psychological warfare. Genghis Khan would send these advanced scouts to sort of plan out his invasion techniques. And look, the Mongols had no problem with murdering literally entire populations. But they would prefer for those people to surrender. Okay, it's less work, less burning, less death. So Genghis Khan's scouts would sort of just share these stories of all the insane things the Mongols did in an attempt to make people afraid and to make people just open the gates and give up. So yes, Genghis Khan would give people the chance to surrender as long as they paid a large tax, as long as they submitted to Mongol rule. But I'll tell you, if you ever killed one Mongol, Genghis Khan's horde would come to your city and kill easily 10,000 people. It was just wow. And then yes, this last picture right here. Look at the size of the Mongol Empire. If you're keeping track of which empire in world history took over the most land, the winner is the Mongols. Okay, maybe second place is the British Empire later in history, and it's sort of disputed. But as far as one contiguous huge landmass, no one comes close to the Mongols. They own more land than anyone else in the history of the world. And how did they win? Through incredible violence and through amazing military tactics involving horses. Okay, the horse people took over the world. Look out for the Mongols. All right, moving on. So, yeah, Mongols take first prize. I really just said that. And yeah, I should emphasize this too. The Mongols' horses were practically invincible. No other military in the world operated like this. They didn't have as many horses. They didn't have the ability to have this mobility. They would hear, oh, hey, the Mongols are coming. Quick, call the peasants. Assemble the military. It'll take us 2 months. But the Mongols are there in 3 days. So you can't prepare. They were sort of like this constantly surprise army. Okay, and I have it written right here. It's like playing a video game with cheat codes. Nothing like this had ever happened in the history of the world before. So they didn't expect that 100,000 horses would show up at your border, demand that you open your gates, demand that you give up all your money, demand that you give up your authority. So people, of course, at first refused, but only to just get massacred in the process. So the Song dynasty, that great Chinese dynasty I talked about in the first unit, the Mongols tore them down bad. And as a result, I think it's the Qing dynasty. Don't quote me on that one. But the Mongols set up their own dynasty in China and had them sort of make China work for the Mongols. Also, there were all these great Islamic Caliphates, especially the Caliphate of Khwarezmia. Khwarezmia was in modern-day Afghanistan, And the reason why you've never heard of Khwarezmia before is because the Mongols killed every man, woman, and child. They just shut that country down. I can confidently say life in what is now Afghanistan was way better 800 years ago than it is today. The Mongols forced them to take apart their cities brick by brick. The Mongols had the men kill the women and children. Then they had the men take apart the cities brick by brick. Then they had the men kill themselves. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of violence they had. There were plenty of times when the Mongols sort of like would take over a city or a population area, and then they would do the math in their head. They're like, this land isn't really great for growing food. There's not a lot of resources we can get out of it. The land would be pretty good for horse grazing, though. But there's all these people that live there. We'll kill the people. It's better suited for horses than human beings. The other thing, too, the Mongols were also super racist. I think I remember reading this source in college. It said something like, a sheep is more valuable than a Chinese person. And I was like, whoa, hardcore. But the Mongol expanse around the world was actually stopped in a few places. I mean, some countries the Mongols just flattened and rolled them over. But they were stopped in Vietnam. The Vietnamese people put up a pretty good defense. But it largely, like, the jungles of Vietnam are really, really hard to move your horses through, so it was sort of an environmental thing that stopped the Mongols more than the strength of the Vietnamese people. Egypt, kind of the same thing. Egypt has this big old desert. Horses generally don't like the desert when there's no grass to graze on, so that was also kind of a limitation. But the Mamelukes did put up a really good fight. And also, interesting fact, camels give off this scent that makes horses like freak out. So the Mamelukes found these camels. I think they were female camels who were in heat. They were like excited to have camel relations, and when they give off this scent and this pheromone that makes horses freak out. So that's how they won that big battle. And then also the Mongols built a bunch of ships, and they attempted to invade Japan. And this part of history is discussed in the very popular video game Ghost of Tsushima. It's an excellent video game. So the Mongols built this big old fleet, and they loaded up a bunch of horses and a bunch of soldiers onto these ships. And as the ships are sailing towards Japan, this huge typhoon comes out of nowhere, and this storm like blows up all those ships. And the Japanese people call that storm the Kamikaze Wind. So that's sort of recalled later in history. But yeah, so it was really like climate and geography that held back the Mongols from literally taking over the world. But all the steppe lands of Asia and parts of Europe, and then all the lands nearby, the Mongols said, this belongs to us. All right, so I really deep dive into the Mongols. I think this stuff is just interesting. So I've got a couple more stories that are just sort of off the cuff, sharing about how hardcore the Mongols are. First of all, is when the Mongols invaded China, they found early explosive technology that I'm just going to functionally call rocket launchers. And so many people around the world in this time assumed if you have big walls, you're not going to get messed with. Like, you can hide behind your walls, and your enemy will take a really long time to try to get over your walls, and you can call for reinforcements or starve out your enemy. But the Mongols, walls were never a problem because they found explosive technology in China. Here's one of the pictures of these sort of rocket launchers right here. And they would just blow up walls and send in the horses and just kill everyone in a city. So there are these two cities in modern-day Iran. I don't even remember what they were called. But these two cities kind of overlooked each other from opposite sides of a valley. Let's just call them Henderson and Centennial. Okay, so imagine these two cities that can sort of see each other. Well, the Mongol Horde is on its way, and Genghis Khan sends his advanced scouts to sort of see what's up with these cities. The scouts arrive. They have this one big meeting with the two leaders of the city, and the scouts say, hey, Mongols are coming. It's 100,000 horses. We kill all the men, women, and children. surrender to us now. There'll be no violence. You just got to give us 25% of all your money, and you got to give us 10% of all your money for the rest of time. Well, so these two cities leaders heard this story, and they're like, no, we're not doing it. So they killed one of the Mongol ambassadors and cut out the eyes of the other Mongol ambassador and told him basically to F off, and we've got big walls. We'll fight the Mongols. We have friends. We'll call up our Islamic allies. We're fine. So Genghis Khan hears about what happens to his ambassadors, and sure enough, a couple weeks later, the Mongol Horde shows up. It's horses for as far as the eye can see. Genghis Khan brings out the rocket launchers, blows holes in the wall of the first city. He sends in the Mongol Horde. They kill everyone in that city, with the exception of a few people they enslave. So what they then do is, as they're still sort of looting and burning the first city, they take some of the slaves from that city, have them cut off the heads of all the people who lived there, and they bring them over to the gates of the second city, and they just create this pile of human heads that's just going up and up and up. So the people of the second city are now thoroughly freaked out. I mean, they just saw the walls blow up in the first city. So the leader of the second city opens the gates, and he demands to submit to the Khan. He says, great Khan, we'll give you 50% of all our money. We'll give you 20% of everything we make every year. Please don't kill us. And then Genghis Khan's like, And so, sure enough, he orders the Mongols to ride into the second city. The gates are open for them. And as soon as the majority of the horde is wandering through the second city, Genghis blows this horn, and the whole Mongol horde just goes around and starts killing everybody in the second city. And they're all dying and slicing up. And the leader of the second city is like, Genghis Khan, what are you doing? We surrendered to you. And Genghis is like, oh no, you did not surrender to me. I gave you that option earlier. You killed one of my ambassadors. You blinded the other. This is your punishment. I've got a reputation to uphold. It's like, wow, hardcore. Yeah, and then another thing I have to mention. So in the first Unit 1 lesson, I talked about the Great Library of Baghdad, that great place of learning where they invented algebra and expanded on geometry and all this great stuff for learning and that. Well, the Mongols eventually make their way to Baghdad. And by this time, I'm pretty confident that Genghis was dead, but now this is one of his sons, I think it was Odeki Khan, is leading the Great Horde. And sure enough, the Mongols get to the gates of Baghdad. And sure enough, the leader of Baghdad, the Caliph, he comes out, and he's like, get out of here. We see you have a lot of horses. Baghdad has big walls. We'll be fine. Odeki says, hey, this city looks pretty cool. I think y'all should surrender. Y'all should give us 20% of all your money. Give us 10% of what you make every year. We'll let you live. The Caliph of Baghdad tells Odeki to basically screw off, says that he's going to assemble the entire Islamic world to declare a jihad on these evil horse people, that they're spawns of Satan, that Allah will save them. Odeki's like, alright, we'll see what happens. And the next day, Odeki brings out the rocket launchers, blows open holes of the walls of Baghdad, sends in the horde, and they just do the violence. And I think the famous quotation is the rivers in Baghdad are the Tigris and the Euphrates. The Tigris River first ran red with the blood of all the people that were killed, and then it ran black with all the ink that was from the books and the scrolls that were dumped in the river. And the great Baghdad library was burned to the ground. Not a single scroll survived. As punishment, the Caliph of Baghdad, Odeki, found his family, brought him out in this place to overlook the destruction of the city. And I think it took the Mongols like 2 months to loot and pillage the city of Baghdad. They were there for a while. And Odeki forced the Caliph to watch his city be destroyed. And then Odeki took a knife and he cut the throats of all of his women and children, or well, all of his wives and his children. And then Odeki cut out the eyes of the caliph, and he said, I want that to be the last thing you ever see, me killing your wives and your children. And so then, for a while, Odeki kept the caliph as kind of his personal prize, and the caliph, this blind man, followed him around everywhere, hooked up to a chain. But then once they were finally done sacking the city of Baghdad, Odeki kind of got bored of this crying blind man, and Odeki said, okay, like what's the most disrespectful way to kill a caliph? Because that's what the Mongols were about, okay? They got salty about some of this stuff. Some of his Muslim people who were working for him said, well, a caliph's blood should never touch the ground. That's seen as inappropriate. So Odeki's like, you know what? All right, I'll make sure his blood never touches the ground. So what Odeki did was he wrapped the caliph in this giant carpet. He put the carpet in front of the horse train, and he ordered all of the Mongol horde to walk their horses and wheel their wagons over this carpet. By the end, the caliph's body was in such a pancake mode, you couldn't even tell there was a human in between that carpet anymore. Woo! Man, see how I recalled all that from memory? That's the stuff that sticks with you, kids. Go to college. Read about incredibly violent people 800 years ago. And then I also do remember this. This is just amazing. So the Pope of the Christian faith heard about all these evil things the Mongols were doing so far away. The Pope had the had the audacity to send a message to, I don't remember if it was Genghis or Odeki, but to say, hey, do you want to be a Christian? And the Pope sent this letter sort of saying like, my God is this eternal God. He'll show you love. If you submit to the Christian faith, then you'll have all the power in the world, da-da-da. Odeki responded to that letter by saying, no, and if your God is so powerful, your God would stop me. So clearly I am more powerful than your God. I'm coming for you. Submit to me. Rome is next. It's like, oh, okay. Look out. Yeah, so Mongols, hardcore people. Don't mess with the Mongols. All right. But here's the big sort of historical concept with the Mongols. Yes, they were incredibly violent. Yes, they did probably more murder than any other military campaign in the history of the world. But once the Mongols were done, once they were like, okay, we're not going into Egypt, we're not going to Vietnam, we're not going to Japan, our borders are set, the Mongols actually ran a pretty effective country. And this super giant Mongol land was now a peaceful place where everybody just submitted to the Great Khan. And this concept of this peace that was achieved after the Mongols took everybody over is known as Pax Mongolica. Once the fires died down and the Mongols are like, all right, we're in charge, give us 20% of everything you make, but if you get out of line, the horde's coming back. Look out. And the Khan then split up the Great Horde, sort of turned them into basically police that policed all the trade routes. And for the first time in world history, world trade was actually like very viable. Because before, if you were someone who wanted to like go from China to Europe and trade stuff, odds are you'd get ambushed by bandits or pirates, you'd be killed, and it would suck. But now the Mongols are guaranteeing everyone's safety, and it's in the interest of the Mongol horse riders to keep everybody playing fair and playing by the rules. And for the first time ever in world history, Europeans are going all the way to China and back. And the dude who's really famous for doing that is Marco Polo. I've got some good documents that I'll post for the class telling you all about his life story. It's super interesting. He runs into dog people, so I don't know if you can say it's all true, but we'll definitely talk about that. And yeah, after this, once this Mongol peace is achieved, there's so much more world trade. And I'm really going to deep dive into that in the second part of this unit here. But so much sharing of ideas, so much greater advancement for human civilization as a whole. So it's definitely a controversial thing. We'll probably write an essay about it, wink, that did the Mongols do more good or more bad for the world? Obviously, the violence is pretty bad, but this new period of peace under this harsh rule, maybe it benefited the world. So that's something we'll see. Okay, I guess I'll talk about this slide too. So I think the Mongol Empire was only truly united under Genghis Khan. But once Genghis Khan died, his son and his grandchildren, they kind of kept it going. But pretty quickly, the Great Khan's empire starts to break apart. And then they become collectively known as the Khanate Kingdoms. And for the most part, the Khanate Kingdoms were kind of cool with each other. But eventually, as history goes on, these various kingdoms, they sort of just start merging with the cultures that they've conquered. Like, for example, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, who becomes like best friends with Marco Polo. Kublai Khan, he's in charge of the China part of the Mongol Empire. Oh, and he founds the Yuan dynasty. So I got that one wrong earlier in the lesson. And Kublai Khan, yes, he was born a Mongol. Yes, he was born riding horses. But Kublai Khan's children will speak Chinese. Kublai Khan's children will become really influenced by Confucianism and Buddhism. And Kublai Khan, in his later life, never rides horses anymore. He just does a bunch of Chinese kind of stuff. And then the Khans that are left to, Genghis Khan's grandchildren that sort of are left to be in charge of the Middle East, they convert to Islam. They speak Arabic. They do a bunch of Arabic cultural stuff. The grandchildren that are in charge of Russia, they convert to Orthodox Christianity. They do a bunch of Russian things. So they're all assimilating to the cultures that they were put in charge of. And eventually, Mongol culture kind of breaks up, and this interconnectedness of this empire will eventually fade. But for about 400 years, the Khanate kingdoms were absolutely top tier, in charge of planet Earth. So I think I can pretty confidently say between 1300 to 1700 might be too long, but yeah. So for about 400 years, the Mongols are top of the line. So, but it won't last because they just culturally assimilate to where they're taken over. Okay, so yeah, Silk Road. We'll talk about that next time. All right, peace out.